Hi, I've been a Sonic fan since the mid-2000s, and I've seen what the series has been through up to now. I know fans can agree with me when I say that the 2010s were not the best years for the series, and were a definite downgrade from the decade before. I got to thinking about why that was, and then I remembered something. Something happened in the early 2010s that either many people don't remember, or didn't even know happened. The reason why the series took a nosedive in this period of time was because of you. No, not you. You. And what some people call the Nintendo exclusivity deal. The Nintendo exclusivity deal was revealed sometime in the spring of 2013. The deal was that Sega was allowed to make 3 Sonic titles exclusively for the Nintendo Wii U and 3DS. The first 2 games were Mario and Sonic at the Sochi 2014 Olympic Games and Sonic Lost World, both of which were revealed in the Nintendo Direct of May 17, 2013. The third was Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric, which would be revealed later on. The first thing that stuck out to me was the Olympic Games. I don't see a reason as to why this would be part of the deal, as there is no way this game was making it to another system. It's a Mario game, and they will never be seen outside of Nintendo. Nintendo would rather go under than see Mario on Xbox. However, I have a theory as to why it's part of the deal, but I'll save that for later. Another thing to note is that Lost World and Boom both received handheld versions. Boom's was titled Shattered Crystal. Oddly, Olympic Games didn't get a handheld version, which makes it the only entry in the Olympic Games series to not get a portable version. Finally, Lost World did get a PC release in 2015, after the deal expired, and I didn't know about this until I started doing research for the video. These were all the facts surrounding the deal. Now, I want to go into how the deal affected the series in the grand scheme of things. So, there were 2 immediate repercussions of the deal. First, Sega was prevented from developing games for the more powerful systems at the time, those being the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, and the PC. The other big issue was that nobody owned a Wii U. Now look, I love the Wii U. I got it just in time for Smash 4. I bought many games for the system. I played a lot of Virtual Console. This is one of my favorite systems that I own. But the majority of consumers at the time did not own a Wii U. If you were a Sonic fan around this time, and you had a Wii U, you had to deal with some lackluster titles that were definitely hindered because of the system's inferior power. I know that the 360 and PS3 games that made it onto Wii U had very little issues, but this system was competing with the PS4 and Xbox One. Regardless, I still enjoyed Lost World, even the 3DS version. If you had a 3DS, all you had was handheld ports of console games. If you had neither, and had one of the 3 remaining current consoles, then you flat out were not getting new content. But hey, the mobile scene was popping because Sega was going all out on these apps. Sonic Runners was such a good time. A little side tangent here. If you had a PC during this time, you had a fantastic library of Sonic games at your disposal. But the only new content you guys were getting were generation mods. That's not a bad thing though, because all of these amazing mods more than made up for the lack of new Sonic titles. For home consoles, I know that the PS4 and Xbox One had some backwards compatibility to some extent, so you weren't locked out from playing the older games, but no Sonic games were released on these 2 systems during this time. The funny thing is, there is one current system that wasn't PC or Nintendo related that did get a Sonic title. Sonic Racing Transformed got a PS Vita release. We were in the trenches. I did find some forums with people voicing their dissatisfaction over the deal. Some were more recent reflections, while others were voicing their opinions around the time of the deal's completion. People were right to share their thoughts on the matter. And then there's this guy. Oh. No. After the deal was fulfilled, 2 big Sonic titles were released. Sonic Mania, and Sonic Forces. Mania is an amazing game. I played it so much to the point that I got sick of it. People fell in love with this entry and I don't blame them. However, this was not the big project that Sonic Team was working on. That was Forces. I remember people thinking along the lines of, if Mania is what the fans can do, then we're excited to see what the big boys can do. Now look, I'm not gonna bash Forces because the internet has done so extensively, but I will dive into its development history a little bit so we can get a better understanding. Forces began development soon after Lost World's completion, but way before anything Boom related came out. So while developing the next anniversary title for the series, Sega also had to work on Rise of Lyric, Shattered Crystal, and the Boom cartoon. Now while these projects weren't 100% involved with Sega, they were still heavily involved since this was supposed to be a big step for the franchise. In addition, out of the 4-year development period that Forces had, most of that time was spent on making the Hedgehog engine 2. I'd say they had at most a year and a half to make the game after they finished the engine, but it didn't help that they only got a small team to make the game. After Forces released, Sega started to get their act together. They released a DLC for Mania, which was cool. Team Sonic Racing came out, which I think is a fine game, but it is the weakest of the racing series. We also got a new Mario and Sonic at the Olympics on Switch, which ended up being the last game before the series got discontinued. And then the 2020s rolled around and we started to get some good stuff. And Colors Ultimate. So I'd say we're in good hands now. This deal with Nintendo didn't just affect game production, it also affected the exposure the series got to the general consumer. Let's look at Sonic's presence from 2011 to 2020 from the game's point of view. In 2011, we got Generations, which I've seen referred to as the last good Sonic game throughout this period. This was available on every major system except Nintendo. Then we got Racing Transformed, excellent game, available on every system under the sun. Then the deal took place, and from 2013 to 2017, only Nintendo users were getting new games, and they were either rough or crossovers. Mania rolls around in mid-2017 and it's an amazing game. Forces rolls around later in the year and it wasn't. Then we got TSR, which was fine, and we end the decade with the final Olympic Games and what is probably the last Nintendo exclusive the Sonic series will ever get. So in this 10-year time span, we got 3 great games and everything else. I don't think the games were attracting many new fans this decade. Outside of the games, what other exposure did the franchise have? First, we had the mobile games. I thought they were all great as we got some solid originals and remasters of Sonic 1, 2, and CD that were so good that they were used in Sonic Origins. Second, we had the comics. During this time, the Sonic Archie comics came to an end and was then succeeded by the IDW comics. Although let's be real, if you're a fan of the comics, either then or now, you are not a casual consumer. You were already invested in the series. Finally, the biggest thing that the series had going for it was the Sonic Boom cartoon. I enjoyed the show because it was hilarious at times, and I know people thought the same because I'm still getting clips and memes on my social media till this day.
Give me a break, I can feed people sandwiches, watch!
Another side tangent here. The cartoon did have an influence over the main series as the characteristics of the Boom counterparts were adapted into the main versions. Amy became more of a refined woman and kinda dropped the whole she's so obsessed with Sonic that she will kidnap him and force him to marry her personality. She is also a lot less aggressive. Tails' over-reliance on gadgets may have stemmed from the show, but I'm not sure. Knuckles used to be a character who was as smart as the rest of the cast, but he was a hothead whose anger would cloud his judgment. He was like Raphael from the Ninja Turtles. For Boom, they turned him into the strong but dumb character. This ended up influencing the movie version of Knuckles as he's also dumb, but not in the same way. Movie Knuckles is well aware of his culture and doesn't know anything about Earth. It's a fish out of water story. Actually, he is literally Thor.
This drink, I like it.
I know, it's great, right?
Another!
I don't think Sonic and Eggman really got affected by the show. Yeah, Sonic is a bit wittier now, but that was a thing before Boom. Overall, this may have been caused indirectly by the deal. However, I did lie about something. Boom was not the most exposure the series got in this decade. It was for a while since it came out in 2014 and lasted a few years, but in 2020, something definitely grabbed people's attention. The deal with Nintendo did affect the series a lot more than I expected, both directly and indirectly, and I do blame Nintendo for locking Sega out from the other consoles. But what if I told you Sega always had a problem with their games on Nintendo systems? For everything I will talk about here, I believe Sega is fully responsible, but they were still hurt by their involvement with Nintendo. Let's go all the way back to 2001. The Dreamcast failed and Sega dropped out of the console market. Their first Sonic games after this, excluding the handhelds because they are not relevant to the point I'm trying to make, were Sonic Adventure 2 Battle and Sonic Adventure DX. These GameCube exclusives were great and sold pretty well. After this, Sega followed up with 3 multi-platform games, those being Heroes, Riders, and Shadow the Hedgehog. These were to be released on GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. The problem here is that the non-Nintendo versions weren't as good as the GameCube version, and that's because Sega decided to make the GameCube version first and then modify it to work on other systems. From what I read, the Xbox versions didn't really suffer, but the PS2 versions did. Most notably, Heroes and Shadow.
Sonic Team still wasn't the greatest at 3D stuff either, and I believe it was an all-new engine middleware, so the game was buggy as hell, especially the PS2 version, which we are playing. Which had and has by far the most bugs. The amount of bugs submitted by the testers was so immense that it eventually got to the point where management told them that if a bug does not prevent them from completing a level, it wasn't to be considered a bug. Do not submit it.
Oh my god.
This wouldn't have been that big of a deal if the PS2 wasn't the best-selling system of all time. Sega deciding to make these games for the system they were familiar with first caused them to give the worst versions to the console that everyone had. That didn't look good. Now let's move on to the 7th generation of systems, and Sonic 06. I'll only talk about some development history here. 06 was meant to release on the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and the Nintendo Wii. However, during development they found out that the Wii was nowhere near as powerful as the other systems, so 06 could not be put on the Wii. Sega ended up cutting the team in half, with the first half finishing development on 06, while the other went on to make Secret Rings so that there would be a Sonic game around the launch of the Wii. This definitely affected 06 because Sega didn't even delay the game after the team was cut, and the end result was not great. As for Secret Rings, it's definitely not my favorite. It's solely for gameplay though, everything else was solid in my opinion. Next we got Riders Zero Gravity, which oddly only released on Wii and PS2. In 2008, mind you. From what I read, they're about the same, just one has motion controls. Next is Unleashed, which did something unique. An HD version was made for the more powerful 7th gen consoles, while the Wii and PS2 got their own version. Now, this was made by Dimps, the team that did all the handheld exclusives, so there wasn't a team that was split in half this time. Good thing they learned. While everything seemed alright after Secret Rings, it does foreshadow how Nintendo was able to screw Sega over. The Wii was the best-selling system of this generation. That's why they were going out of their way to put Sonic on Nintendo, because everybody had a Wii. And that's the same reason why they were still making PS2 games, because everyone still had that. Nintendo was a safe bet for Sega. Afterwards, we got Black Knight, which I enjoyed a lot more than Secret Rings. And then Colors. Colors successfully brought the HD boost gameplay to the inferior hardware, and people loved it. When this game first came out, I remember people saying it was a nice return to form for the series. I know people have switched up on this game since then. Then Generations released, without a Nintendo version. This is when Sega knew what they were doing. They knew not to port their big budget titles to the inferior systems, and instead make alternatives or exclusives to avoid strain on production. That's why soon after Colors, Lost World began production. But wait, that doesn't make sense. Lost World was part of the deal. How could it begin development before Generations even released? Remember towards the beginning of the video that I mentioned a theory about the deal when talking about the Sochi games? What if the deal wasn't what we thought it was? Lost World began development soon after Colors because Sega already wanted another Nintendo game. I know that the deal wasn't in place yet because it began development on PC and later moved to the Wii U after its reveal. The deal was made after Lost World's conception. The Sochi games was probably only part of the deal because it was already being made. This series was getting a new entry every 2 years. Sonic Boom may have been the only game created by the deal, if it even was. Sega had to take the deal because they've had plenty of success with Nintendo already. They trusted them, and they had no way of knowing that the Wii U would tank as much as it did. This deal was made out of convenience, and it screwed Sega by not letting them release games on the systems that were making money. Let's put things into perspective. Throughout the 90s, Sonic was the king of Sega. He was Mario's big rival. He had that bad boy attitude that the 90s thrived on. He is one of the reasons why people used to argue that Sega was better than Nintendo. He also had several cartoons and the debut of his comics.
Foot-tall Sonic the Hedgehog was swept into a street lamp at 50.
In the 2000s, he was on every console you could think of. There was even a game on the N-Gage. He pretty much showed up to every party he could. So even if you didn't play Sonic, you probably knew who he was. Then, in the 2010s, because of the deal, he was most known for mobile games, a cartoon, and if the deal was never made, maybe things would have turned out better, but definitely different. Lost World could have been multi-platform from the start. Maybe Rise of Lyric wouldn't have turned out the way it did. Maybe Forces would have gotten the development time it deserved. Who knows? Even the Aftermath could have been way different. Another thing, however, are remasters. Many 7th gen games got 8th gen remasters around the system's launch. There was even some for 6th gen games. Potentially, we could have gotten remasters of Shadow the Hedgehog, Sonic 06, and Unleashed, but I don't think we'll get that anymore, and it's for an entirely different reason. That's a topic for another video though. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much. This is my first time doing a video like this, so it really does mean a lot to me. I do have another video in mind like this, so what do you think I could improve on before making it? And regarding the topic of the video, what did you think? Were you there when the exclusivity deal was announced and everyone was speculating what the next game would be? Or was this the first time you ever heard of this? Is there something I overlooked? And what did you think about this era of Sonic? Please let me know in the comments. I hope to see you in the next video. Take care.